Welcome back to part 2 of the Thursday edition of The Attitude with Arnie Arneson and producers Dave Scott and Stephanie Collins. You know the drill. We're continuing to record on an overcast Wednesday morning. So, one of the last Thursdays of the month, we always hang out with Jonathan Feingold. He's a professor at BU Law School. We have been teaching something called race class now for over 3 years, heading on to 4. It's been an unbelievable ride. We did it initially because of the assault on DEI, on critical race theory, and I said, don't get mad, get even, explain to people what this is, because we're always acting out of ignorance, which is why they're so effective at what they do. But before I introduce our conversation with Jonathan Feingold, I saw an article at The Independent, which is a newspaper in England, and here is the headline, and I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from this piece. It's entitled, Black Leaders Reject Comparison of Unapologetic Racist Charlie Kirk to Martin Luther King. The death of Charlie Kirk has sparked a contentious debate, laying bare America's racial divisions as conservatives and white Christians, particularly evangelicals, memorialize him as a martyr. This heroic view, however, stands in stark contrast to the insulting statements about people of color, central to his political activism, a point of contention, especially for Black clergy. Quote, and I love this quote, "How you die does not redeem how you lived." Let me repeat that quote. "How you die does not redeem how you lived," stated Reverend Howard John Wesley of Alexandria, Virginia, in a sermon that has amassed tens of thousands of views online. Kirk's killing on a college campus in Utah, which was captured in a graphic video, showed just what was going on in the fault line between politics and race. But many Black pastors in the largest African-American Christian denominations linked the veneration of Kirk, who has used his platform to discuss matters of race in America, including statements denigrating Black people, immigrants, women, Muslims, LGBTQ, weaponizing faith to justify colonialism, enslavement, and bigotry. Christianity told itself that Black people were inferior and therefore enslaved. We can call it Christian-esque, but it's white nationalism wrapped in talk of Jesus. So as I was reading that, knowing that we were anticipating a conversation with Jonathan Feingold, Jonathan, you know, it's interesting because we're talking about race class. And I wanted folks to know that it wasn't just the LGBTQ community. It wasn't just Blacks. It wasn't just women. There was, I mean, virtually everyone that wasn't white, male, and Christian was, you know, suspect by this individual. And in fact, I posted something that you may not be aware of, but I wasn't at the time. I wrote, as MAGA and Trump canonized Charlie Kirk, here is his take on the Jews. Jewish donors, Kirk claimed, were the #1 funding mechanism of radical open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. Indeed, the philosophical foundation of anti-whiteness has been largely financed by Jewish donors in this country. So with that as our opening salvo, Jonathan Feingold, thank you so much for doing this for so many years now and so many months. I appreciate it because sometimes we just need to have a conversation out loud because we're living in very challenging times, and what is up is down, what is Black is white, and what is truth is false. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Arnie. Happy to be with you.
How do we start?
I would be lying if I didn't say I was really angry right now. And I'm not angry with I'm disturbed by, but maybe not angry with the right-wing, far-right ecosystem institutions, organizations, entities in this country who are attempting to euphemize, lionize, champion, one of their own. It's disturbing. It's really disturbing. I would encourage folks to watch Stephen Miller's speech at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, which I think were Jason Stanley to do a new edition of his really accessible work on fascism. That speech could be its own chapter, in which Stephen Miller, in the name of carrying on Charlie Kirk's legacy, engages in what I think can only be described as fascist discourse, in which he is dividing the world into us and them, where the them are evil, the us are righteous, and the only way forward is victory through domination. And so I'm disturbed. I'm troubled. It's Jeff Sharlet had a really powerful uh, conversation on Democracy Now last week when he said that, this is a moment of great peril for our country, and I think that's right. But the anger that I feel right now is that Democratic leadership, that Democrats are betraying everything they say they stand for by joining in on the lionization and euphemization, I don't know if that's even a word, the whitewashing and the historical revisionism regarding this individual and their legacy. We should and we must denounce unequivocally murder and violence. Just this morning, there's reports out of Dallas that a white
Yeah,
sniper fired into an ICE detention facility,
killed two.
apparently attempting to kill detainees. Um, we're so we have to do that, but there is nothing that should lead anyone to think that we have to distort reality. And so I'm going to name some names because there have been resolutions coming out of Congress, both the Senate and the House, that include lies and have been approved by elected officials who I generally think very highly of. And so in Massachusetts, we have 9 Congresspeople, 9 Democrats in Congress, 7, including Jim McGovern and Richard Neal, both of whom I have really high opinions of, voted to approve a resolution honoring Charlie Kirk, including language that says resolved, that the House of Representatives honors the life, leadership, and legacy of Charlie Kirk, whose steadfast dedication to the Constitution, civil discourse, and biblical truth inspired a generation to cherish and defend the blessings of liberty. This is so dangerous. So a friend was like, "Yeah, but who reads these resolutions? Why does it matter?" Part of the reason why it matters is because it naturalizes, it normalizes, it marks as legitimate the white supremacist rhetoric, discourse, and ideology that animates the organizations that he helped to build, that that anchors the sentiment that Stephen Miller is articulating and captures the broader worldview of an administration. And now I'm going to quote some folks devoted to cruel bigotry, compulsive violence, and sadistic persecution. It is incredibly important right now that we are honest. And when Democrats, when Senate leadership when House leadership, also Catherine Clark, approves this, when they are, when New York Times pundits are saying
Ezra
that
Klein. Yeah, keep going.
that this person practiced politics the right way, they are saying that MAGA's youth flank, that through things like professor watch list, school board watch list, is part of the infrastructure and machinery that is designed to harass and intimidate political opponents who are not viewed as other humans with dignity to engage in meaningful, serious debate, but as enemies to defeat. And so I want to quote someone else now, Isaac Kamola, who's a political science professor at Trinity and has focused on the right-wing networks that for decades have been attempting to undermine sites of democratic or pillars of democracy, including higher education. And what Professor Kamola said is that Charlie Kirk will be remembered as one of the foremost architects of the political strategy of treating faculty and students with whom he disagrees as enemies to be defeated.
But when you have this complete absence of response and clarity, and I mean, just to let you know, Jonathan, is I'm trying to listen and I'm shaking, okay? And I'm looking at Newsweek, and here is the threat to the Democrats that did not vote for the resolution. Here is the headline. Every Democrat who voted against the Charlie Kirk resolution. This is in Newsweek, okay, Jonathan? And then they proceed to say why it matters, what to know, and the names of every single Democrat that voted against the resolution. And they kind of have embraced the Ezra Klein spin about, he did politics right, about how he was so civil, all these things. And then Newsweek puts a target on all their backs. All right. And of course, it doesn't explain why they voted against it for exactly what you just read to me from the resolution. So you keep saying the resolution has no traction? Look what Newsweek did. Newsweek not only gave it traction, Jonathan, it literally made each one of these Democrats a poster, and not for something good, for
And
something tragic.
So the ideology that is revealed through the many statements that come from this person reveals a number of things, including how in far-right movements in the United States, the white supremacist ideology that views the United States as a Christian, as a white nation, and disparages, denigrates, quote unquote, foreigners, immigrants, Black people, Islam, all of that is intertwined with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Which is why I read
It
what I read.
reveals that
Yes.
if we want to have a serious discourse in this country about anti-Semitism, we have to understand how it is interlocking with the violent anti-immigrant rhetoric, with the violent white supremacist rhetoric that the President of the United States, that Stephen Miller, that others fuel on a daily basis. And so you mentioned great replacement theory
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read a Charlie Kirk quote from a Guardian article. This is a quote from his show in March 2024. Quote, the great replacement strategy, which is well underway every single day on our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different. Great replacement theory, as the New York Times recently explained, is a once fringe conspiracy theory positing that Jews are trying to replace white Americans with non-white immigrants. That ideology motivated the gunman who killed 11 worshipers at a Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018. That's a reference to the Tree of Life synagogue. What I think people often overlook, fail to recognize, is that the person involved in that shooting, there is strong evidence that they targeted that synagogue because of that synagogue's immigration relief work.
Who's left that's not being frightened, focused on, challenged, targeted? As I'm listening to you, I had seen a Guardian piece, and the Guardian. I mean, after Donald Trump's rants at the UN, I mean, the world is looking at us a total aghast. I mean, they can't quite believe it. But in a lot of ways, what Donald Trump did on the floor of the UN is, in a lot of ways, the sort of the mythology that we're now creating around Charlie Kirk. And what this reporter at the Guardian said was that Kirk ruled over an online fiefdom, peddling his signature brand of rage-baiting racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, and misogynistic commentary. It wasn't just his vitriolic style, but also his popularization of cruelty, humiliation, and dehumanization of political opponents, especially college students, that attracted millions to his audience. He famously said empathy was a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage. All right, I want you to, about the Democrats that voted against the resolution. I want this paragraph sent to every Democrat that voted for it, because they are aiding and abetting the lie, because they are now
And
asking us to embrace someone who hated me, who hated you, who hated the vast majority of Americans, who baited all of us. Think about that. We are supposed to embrace this man. And look, I am against the death penalty. I've never shot a gun. I don't believe in violence. I always tell my children, use words, not your fists. This is the worst in a democracy. If we don't use a more rational response to change, we will end up in a civil war. So the last thing I want to see is this kind of thing happening under any set of circumstances. But you can't change the man because he was
and
horrifically murdered. And
and
I don't know how to get people to understand they're not the same.
and so again, it is very easy to unequivocally denounce murder and political violence, which is
Absolutely.
necessary, and which,
Absolutely.
the hypocrisy is not lost on anyone. That after elected Democrats were assassinated earlier this year, the Trump
Nothing.
administration did not blink an eye. I do not, I'm actually not sure if flags were flown at half-mast. In Massachusetts, our governor ordered flags to be flown at half-mast this week, last week. And so, but the resolutions are not coming just out of the House. The Senate, I believe, through a voice vote, approved a resolution supporting the designation of October 14th, 2025 as the quote unquote National Day of Remembrance for Charlie Kirk, and ends by encouraging educational institutions, civic organizations, and citizens across the United States to observe this day with appropriate programs, activities, prayers, and ceremony that promote civic engagement and principles of faith, liberty, and democracy that Charlie Kirk championed. This is inexcusable.
Yeah.
It is not hard to denounce the violence without revising history and whitewashing a white supremacist movement. Do you want to know what's also October 14th, Arnie?
What?
George Floyd's birthday.
The selective grief, the selective acknowledge, the selective time to put flags at half-mast, the selective time to offer a resolution. I just wanted to go back to the shooting in Minnesota. Following the Minnesota shooting, Trump called the incident absolutely terrible. However, he took the opportunity and slammed Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, because he said he did not call him. I think he's a terrible governor, says Trump. I think he's grossly incompetent person. But I may call him. If he had asked me, I might have lowered the flags. Look at the spin. Look at the turn. Look at how he justifies his failure to act. All right? Everything is through his lens. Again, how did I begin? What is up is down. What is black is white. What is truth is false. And that's what he does. So at this assassination, he attacks Governor Walz. That's his response. I just want people to, and think about it, they were in their homes. They thought it was a cop. They were in some place where you and I think that we're safe. All right? They were answering a door. I mean, talk about the sense of vulnerability. You know, the idea, I mean, this could happen to any of us. Any of us could open a door. And yet, this is what happened. He killed both the woman and her husband. She a prominent Democrat, he the spouse, and there was a list of other Democrats that he was planning on assassinating. Trust me, this was just the beginning of the list. I don't know.
And I think where I just want to land, and this was a point that Jeff Sharlet made in his Conversation on Democracy Now, which again, I think folks should listen to. So he was talking about how Charlie Kirk was an incredible organizer on the right and helped to build the youth, essentially MAGA front. And Jeff Sharlet noted how the particular, the talking points, the rhetoric, the moves that Charlie Kirk made over the past 10 plus years evolved, and that the transphobia, the anti-LGBTQ stuff that he leaned into more recently was not always there. And that the Christian evangelical, Christian nationalism was not always there. But what has been unifying is his commitment to whiteness and racial hierarchy. And one thing that we will have to find a way to confront in a way that has not happened yet, particularly among leading Democrats, is to name and to reckon with the fact that one of the tips of the spears that the Trump administration has been using to tear through American democracy is racial resentment and a commitment to a very old school bigotry that views race as biological and views equality as immoral.
I'm going to have to let you go, but I want to sort of end with what one of the black ministers said. He spoke to all the people in his tradition and said, "It is our tradition of speaking out against those who promote racism." That is in their tradition. It's in my tradition and yours as well. Thank you so much, Professor Feingold, for doing this. As you know, once a month we teach a class called the Race Class. Why? Because we know race matters. Part of this project is to make sense of what that means. Again, thank you, Jonathan. This, everyone,
Thanks,
is the Thursday edition of The Attitude. We'll schmooze tomorrow. Everyone, ciao.